fans, welcome to the Working Fans Podcast PPV review show, episode 7, where we are going to talk an early Saturday night's main event. This was a great pick by Dave, but before we get into it, we're going to get a great pick for us, and that's Game Up Hard Hydration. It's like your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink got together, had a baby, but it's so much better. Dave's going to give you the rundown.
Yeah, it comes in 4 great flavors: fruit punch, orange, lemon lime, and grape. That's an 8-pack, guys. And by the way, it's only 110 calories. It's low carb. So enjoy that Game Up. And if you haven't yet, go back and watch Saturday night's main event, season 1, episode 3. It's a beauty. I picked this one because it was November when it was aired, and I thought, cool, the little Thanksgiving theme. But actually, it's more of a Halloween theme, it turned out.
Yeah, this had Vince McMahon's like wishes all over it, because like it had like a little bit, I thought, of like Tuesday Night Titans type vibes.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely had Vince's fingerprints all over it. This was a great show though.
Yeah, starting off, you had Gene Okerlund introing the show with Bobby Heenan. And was that the Halloween theme or like a Halloween knockoff theme that was playing at the start of this?
That was my guess. It was either that or the Exorcist theme. I couldn't remember, but it was a knockoff of one of those horror themes.
Yeah, you had Bobby Heenan bobbing for pumpkins, which will come up later in the show. And he ends it by saying King Kong Bundy will smash Hogan. You go from there to a Hogan video where Hogan cuts a promo on Bundy's team and Andre walks in. Bundy and Stud broke the rules, but tonight will be a fair fight. You go from that to a Piper Ventura video. This is like quick cuts. Just each thing happens. Roddy Piper dressed like Superman. Jesse Ventura has what I called a funny hat and glasses on, or a funny hat and jacket. It turns out it's a Three Musketeers hat. You have Ventura talks to Piper about interrupting Uncle Elmer's wedding, which happened at the last Saturday night's main event and is a theme throughout much of this. And Piper brings up Ventura making fun of Uncle Elmer and his wife. We go from there to Gene Okerlund with Terry Funk and Jimmy Hart backstage.
Yes.
Funk and Hart are newcomers to Saturday night's main event. When did they arrive in WWF? Because it couldn't have been much before this.
Well, Jimmy was already there. He had, I want to say the Hart Foundation was already in the WWF at that time. But Terry Funk was definitely new. Terry Funk had probably only been there for, I mean, in the old television days, it probably would have felt like a couple weeks, but he might have been there for a few months at that point, but not long.
And then you had the intro video to Saturday night's main event. This brought me back. Just had that 80s vibe. There was great, clips from wrestling around that time. And, we go to the Vince intro. It's from Hershey, Pennsylvania. He runs down the card, which this is a stacked card. You got Hogan and Andre versus Stud and Bundy. You have Tito Santana versus Macho Man for the IC championship.
Yes.
A Kung Fu challenge match between Mr. Fuji and Ricky Steamboat. A trick-or-treat adventure with Roddy Piper. And he introduces Jesse and talks about Piper and the wedding. And we go from there to what has to be, this tickled me so much, the Terry Funk and Mel Phillips footage.
Yes.
Dave, you have talked about this before, but why don't you let the people know about what happened?
They just called him the ring attendant here, but Mel Phillips, who we in real life know basically sexually abused some kids. So he's a piece of shit. He basically, in this thing, though, he put on Terry Funk's hat as he was trying to hold everything, and Terry Funk just starts beating the crap out of him. And, Vince is like, that poor man. But knowing what we know about Mel Phillips, I was like, give it to him again, Terry. Kick his ass, Terry. Honestly, at the time, I remember seeing this as a kid, and I thought there was racial, undertones here. I thought Terry Funk was particularly targeting, African-American people. I thought he did not like black people. I thought this was a thing. And, there was some things that would make you believe that in Terry's character, the way it was presented at the time.
Yeah, it was, McMahon keeps referred to him as an innocent ring attendant.
Yeah.
And you did get that vibe from Terry. If you were just watching it storyline wise, it looked like Terry was just being every bit the heel he was. But I mean, knowing the story, you gotta wonder, did he get a couple extra shots in there? It was funny because afterwards, Jimmy Hart said it was television tricks, and Funk says it's nothing compared to what he's gonna do to JYD tonight.
This match. Do you want to get into this match? I love this match.
Well, I have a question first about this. We have a couple things before we get to the match. Was Rita Chatterton the ref in the footage here?
Yeah, so there was the other right. Thank you. So that was the other person who was, of course, has been in the news recently because of everything going on with Janelle Grant. We've looked at Vince McMahon's past with a documentary, and Rita Chatterton was the one who had accused Vince of rape. I don't think it ever. Obviously, well, Vince is famous in that documentary for saying the statute of limitations had run out, even if I was guilty, which is, God, such a gross, horrible thing to say. But yes, that was Rita Chatterton, who was the referee at that point.
And it goes from there to recapping. It was Terry Funk and JYD, Madison Square Garden, summer 1985. Funk was attacking JYD in the stomach with the branding iron, and there was garbage being thrown into the ring. People were so upset. Is that the earliest you think you've ever seen garbage get into the ring?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that was probably a commonplace, and that's right around the time I started watching wrestling. So
Yeah, it's wild. It's so much different than today. It happened a lot in the 90s, but then has cooled off since. Before the match, Gene Okerlund's talking to JYD. JYD keeps it short and simple. He says that was Terry Funk's day, but today is going to be his.
I love this match. This was Terry Funk just bumping his ass off for JYD. JYD was probably in the best shape of his career here, other than Mid-South Wrestling. Like he looked like $1,000,000. There's a point in this match where JYD literally picks up Funk for a body slam and just body slams him over the top rope straight to the concrete floor, no mats. And I don't know how Terry is even going to get up from that shit, but he did. And, JY he's headbutting Jimmy Hart. He's beating up everybody. And at the end of this, though, Terry Funk ends up stealing a victory with the help of Jimmy Hart. And after this match, Jimmy gets his little pants pulled down here because JYD will battle back because they were going to brand JYD after this match, too. The brand and I had gotten involved in. Terry was going to brand JYD, and basically JYD fought it off, beat up Terry, and then he ended up giving Jimmy Hart the brand on his little red underwear.
Yeah, if you notice when Jimmy Hart's making his way out of the ring and Terry Funk's helping him up, Terry Funk is like pulling his underwear so you could see his ass more. And this was just pure 80s WWF. I enjoyed the match as well. I mean, it was a little uncomfortable seeing Terry Funk try to brand JYD, but if you think about that's what passed for entertainment in the 80s. And we went from there to Mean Gene at the pie eating contest. We are going to have 3 different events that are part of the Halloween party competition. 2 teams captained by Bobby Heenan and Lou Albano. And you have an interesting array of costumes here. You have Iron Sheik as Batman, Tito Santana as Zorro, Macho Man and Liz as Tarzan and Jane, Nikolai Volkov as Robin, Heenan as Davy Crockett, King Kong Bundy as Abe Lincoln, Hulk Hogan as Hercules, Elmer Jr. and Jim are 3 Musketeers, Lou Albano is Julius Caesar. It's Bundy versus Albano. Who can eat the most pies in 90 seconds? And Albano gets the win. Bundy gets all fired up, hits Albano in the face with a pie. What did you think of this segment after such a great match?
This total WWF from this time period. You're going to have great wrestlers like Terry Funk and Junkyard Dog, and you're going to have a bit of the ridiculousness. This is the Slammy Award started around this time with Vince McMahon and that Stand Back, and you had wrestlers playing instruments. And so this is par for the course.
Yeah, I would say of the segments that aired tonight, this was one of the better ones outside of the wrestling. You go from the pie eating contest to Uncle Elmer, Hillbilly Jim, and Cousin Junior in the ring at Piper's Pit. They want to confront Piper about what happened at the last Saturday night's main event. They show footage of it, and they want to hear from Jesse Ventura as well. So they call Jesse from the commentary stand. He comes down. He makes like a big show of it. And just seeing Jesse get in the ring was wild because I think in my whole time watching wrestling, I've really only known Jesse Ventura as a commentator. You see Bob Orton get down on all fours. Roddy Piper pushes Cousin Junior over. They get into a little melee, and then Jesse Ventura is able to get out of the ring just before Uncle Elmer gets a hold of him. This wasn't a bad Piper's Pit. It advanced the story from the last Saturday night's main event. Did you get to see much Jesse Ventura in the ring?
No, I saw Jesse wrestle a couple times before this when I was younger. I can remember him being a part of a tag team with Adrian Adonis. I think they were called the East-West Connection. That was it. Like before you knew it, he was kind of doing commentary, and he was part of doing that Jesse Ventura's Body Shop segment too, where he would interview wrestlers. I do remember a match with him, Piper, and Orton against the Hillbillies, and that is going to be obviously on the next Saturday night's main event. So that's what led to that. I remember that match. That's the last match I ever saw Jesse in. Just one little thing I want to add too, for those wondering here. Uncle Elmer also wrestled a lot of his career as Plowboy Frazier. I was looking this up. And Cousin Junior was actually Moondog Cujo. So he was part of the Moondogs at one point.
I was about to ask if you knew who they were, because a lot of the times, even in those days, they would bring people in from other companies and, kind of almost recast them. Vince is famous for it. I couldn't remember exactly who they were, but I'm glad you looked that up. And we go from this segment to Mean Gene at the Great Pumpkin Dunk. It's Bobby Heenan versus Cousin Junior. JYD is dressed up as a mummy. I loved it. This is the second round of that party competition. And it's weird. They're bobbing for pumpkins and 200 gallons of chocolate syrup, which I wonder why they use this. But what did you think of this segment?
Typical cartoonish stuff for the time period. I had kind of started to tune this out a little bit. I did enjoy the rest of the show, but this was a little bit of a lull for me.
Yeah, Bobby Heenan wins, and you could see both men spreading the chocolate syrup all over their face. This was, I enjoyed this a little less than the pie eating contest, but you got to remember, this was a fill-in for Saturday Night Live, so they're getting their weird skits in there. And we go from there to Mean Gene with Bobby Heenan and King Kong Bundy and John Studd. Bobby Heenan is celebrating his win, and he's hyping the team of Studd and Bundy. Bundy talks about how big they are. Studd talks about how they're the best team. You go from there. Mean Gene then talks to Albano, Andre, and Hogan. Heenan, Bundy, and Studd are on their way to the ring. Hogan is putting over Andre. Andre says that's enough of the talking. Let's go to the ring. And when I'm looking at this, you look at the card, you got Terry Funk and JYD in the opener. Both big elsewhere, but we remember them as being like these early figures of WWF. Now you've got four of the biggest individuals in WWF at the time: Hogan, Andre, Studd, and Bundy. I was amazed this match went on second. You would have felt like this would have been the main event.
Interesting structure of the card. This just felt like a big deal. They were calling him like Hogan and Andre, like the dream team. These were the four biggest guys in WWF at the time. Maybe four definitely the biggest guys in pro wrestling in general. Maybe not the biggest, but they were up there for sure. Andre was. I thought there was an interesting point before this match even started too. I can't remember exactly what it was, but Mean Gene was referencing like the pumpkin contest, and he had said something that'll just be a factor. And Hogan said, "That's enough of that. Back to reality." Almost like Hogan, of all people, was kind of trying to keep things on course here with, let's be serious here. And I thought that was interesting. Match itself, big man matchup. I enjoyed it. There was something about this time period where everything just felt more like a brawl, and there was a certain realism to it. But yeah, Hogan and Andre got the win by DQ, right? I'm blanking out here. I don't have it in my notes, but
yes, I think it was because he was stuck in the ropes. They kept attacking him, so the ref called for the DQ. Hogan came to the rescue. It was a great match, like you said, just a big man battle. And we go from there to Mean Gene comes in the ring with Hogan and Andre. Right. Andre says he didn't get enough. Hulk says they will never beat Andre the Giant fairly. And what we know now in wrestling, it was probably a way of getting around Andre taking that loss. But this just took me back to being a kid and watching wrestling, and you got so mad that Hogan and Andre got DQ'd, and you want to see them get their hands on them. Right. Did they ever wrestle again as a team, or was this kind of setting up for two separate tag team or two separate singles matches?
They would have probably definitely teamed up together on maybe house shows and stuff like that. But we are talking before WrestleMania 2 here. Andre is going to be involved in a battle royal. So this is still 85, right? November 85. So yeah, so 86 we made 2. So Andre is going to be in a battle royal that year. Hogan's going to be actually in a feud with Bundy. I'm sure they teamed up a few more times. I can't think of anything off the top of my head in terms of like a TV thing, though.
Either way, it's for the biggest men you have, and it was going to be a spectacle for Saturday night. Mean Gene then goes to Macho Man and Elizabeth. Yes. Gene asks Macho Man, why a woman manager? Then
Yes.
he asks Liz why she picked wrestling. Gene says it's unusual for someone to get a title shot so early and asks if he's ready. And Macho Man is ready. And we go to Macho Man versus Tito Santana for the WWF Intercontinental Championship. When did Macho Man arrive? It couldn't have been much earlier than this if Gene is asking
No.
all these questions.
When you're talking about the manager thing too, when you asked about Jimmy Hart earlier being here, because I remember Jimmy Hart was one of the managers buying for the services of Randy Savage. They had this thing where all these different managers were trying to get Randy Savage, and Bobby Heenan would show up, Fuji, and then Savage basically came in and cut a promo and said, "This is my manager." And it was Elizabeth. And of course, everybody was like, whoa, who is she? You know, it's just this beautiful girl. Wasn't what everybody was used to during that time period. And yeah, it was interesting because I expected Elizabeth was probably going to be like this big heel, but they never did it. It was an interesting dynamic. And they might have even teased it early on. But here you could even see later on, you'll see Savage berating her a little bit too. And it's like that was the dynamic early on, was Savage was this heel and even more of a heel by berating this, lovely, smaller in stature, woman, Elizabeth, who was in real life, of course, his wife. So they hadn't been there too long, but yeah, this was in that time period. They had already built up Savage as all these managers wanted him. He picked Elizabeth, and here he was getting an Intercontinental title match against Tito Santana on Saturday night's main event. Former guest of the show, by the way.
It was a good match that ends in a double count out. I feel like almost any other time this would be disappointing, but something about this show, like there's a couple like fucked finishes, I would say, but yeah, you don't leave feeling, let down. I think because it's on TV and maybe not on a pay-per-view.
And Savage is going to win this title in the beginning of 86. I want to say it's like February, maybe beginning of February. So it's only a few months later. Savage is going to win this at Boston Garden with a foreign object he hits Tito Santana in the face with.
Wow, such a wild time. Tito Santana being Intercontinental Championship. Pre-Matador Tito Santana, which is great. And we go from here to Mr. Fuji and Ricky Steamboat preparing for the Kung Fu Challenge. How would you describe Mr. Fuji's prep?
Well, Steamboat was wrecking boards while Fuji made mean faces and weird noises that you would expect a stereotypical Asian man to make in the 1980s on WWF television.
Yeah, it was great. And we go from here to Roddy Piper preparing for Halloween at his rented Connecticut house.
This was goofy as hell, but it was interesting where Vince had said that Piper was a native of Scotland, and Piper started making what I would expect were Aborigine, natives in Africa noises. And,
yeah, he threw a stick as well.
Yes, he did. So again, more of the stuff in the time period, but I don't know. It was bad, but it was funny at moments because it was so just cringe 80s, at the end, just more cartoonish stuff sandwiched in great pro wrestling.
I was amazed that I liked this as little as I did because it involved Piper. It had him making candy apples with bowling balls and sticks, making chocolate bars with bricks wrapped in foil. He gets the trick-or-treaters. He goes to give them the candy apples, breaks the bags, the candy spills everywhere, and then he just gives them bags of candy corn and they take off. And you almost had to wonder, were these his kids? Were these Vince's kids? Who were these kids? And why was this segment? And in the end, it turns out the kids had pranked him because the candy had red peppers in it. Right. And I hated this until the end where there was that resolution. And then I hated it a little less because at least like the story came to some kind of fruition, but definitely not my favorite segment on this show.
No. It was an interesting show, man. I enjoyed it overall. So many good, interesting matches. But yeah, it definitely had some weird segments. This was one of them.
Yeah, then you went backstage to Hogan reacting to the kids pranking Piper. Yep. Then you go to Mean Gene interviewing Mr. Fuji. Fuji is breaking bricks before the Kung Fu Challenge. We see Don Morocco joining Fuji in ring. They make a big point of usually Fuji is Morocco's manager, but tonight Morocco is Fuji's. And we got into the Kung Fu Challenge match. And this was interesting because all night they kept saying Kung Fu Challenge. So I figured, is this going to be like another skit thing where they just do different karate things? But no, this is Ricky Steamboat versus Mr. Fuji in the ring.
Yeah.
I kind of like this because it was different. It was almost like, if they were to envision MMA at that time, this is what it would be.
It was like a match where you pretty much only saw like strikes and takedowns. There was chops, kicks, and then the occasional hip toss or stuff like that. But yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of just a regular match when you think about it, right? There was no special rules, but the way they wrestled it made it feel different. Almost like I wonder if behind the scenes they're like, what is a kung fu match? And they're like, we'll make it work. Don't worry about it, Vince.
Yeah, and it was crazy to see Fuji in ring because I had never seen him really wrestle. Mm-hmm. And we see Steamboat gets the win with a pin after a top rope drop kick. Morocco missed Steamboat after the match. Yeah. And there's a post-match beatdown. So
I guess it was missed. I don't remember Morocco ever using a mist. So I was kind of wondering what he spit in his eyes, but Steamboat was, holding his eyes, like his eyes were burning like a mist. I was wondering if he had chewing tobacco and I just missed it.
Yeah, it was definitely weird, but Saturday night's main event, you're just adding to the spectacle. Mm-hmm. You go from there to the finals of the Halloween competition, the pumpkin pass, where you cradle a pumpkin in your neck, partner grabs it with the neck, first person to drop it loses. Now, the competition's tied at this point, so stakes are high, Dave. You got 60 seconds to do this. Albano drops it in 5 passes. Elizabeth drops it in 4. Macho Man yells at her when she drops it. Right. Albano's team wins 2-1. It is what the fuck it is. Like this, you basically end with Jesse, Gene, and Vince wrapping it up. It was great wrestling. It was goofy skits. It was 80s WWF. Yeah. It was decent. Like, I'm glad we watched it, but
I know. I'm interested to watch it.
Goofy shit was just at its goofiest in this show.
I'd like to watch.
I would love to watch
episode 3, right? So I don't know if the next one's on season 2, but I almost want to watch the next one just to see the hillbillies with Piper and Orton and Jesse Ventura. I'm kind of like, okay, I want to go back and almost watch that match now. I want to see that episode.
I know. I was so invested in it for this one that, Dave, why don't we make next Friday's episode of the podcast a special review where we talk about another Saturday night's main event. And guys, thank you for joining us today. And all of this is brought to you by Game Up Hard Hydration.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.